Today we're going to talk about the theories of why we age and starting to talk about the subject of what we can do about it. And it's coming right up. Why do we age and how can we slow it down? That's been a question people have puzzled over for centuries. From a scientific standpoint, there's been many animal studies that have been done, and really the only well accepted way of preventing aging and extending lifespan is caloric restriction, which is almost counterintuitive because you'd think that you would need more nutrition in order to last longer, but in fact it's the exact opposite. So any theory of aging that we propose is going to have to explain how caloric restriction actually extends life. So, one of the first theories that came along in terms of aging is the so-called disposable soma theory. Soma is a word that refers to body, and in this theory, what they proposed was that there's a limited finite amount of energy that you can use for growth or maintenance, and once you've spent it all, then you're done. Sort of like if you have a certain amount of money, once you spent it, it's done, you're broke, and that's it. And in certain animals, this certainly looks true. The Pacific salmon, for example, direct all of their energy towards reproduction. And once they've used up all their energy, they spawn and then they die. In mice, for example, this also looks like it's mostly true in that mice really are subject to heavy predation. They get eaten by other animals a lot, so they spend a lot of their energy up front, growing quickly, maturing quickly, and breeding like crazy at a much higher rate than humans or other animals. And in doing so, they spend all their energy and they don't live very long. Most of these theories have a little bit of a problem in that they can't really explain why calorie restriction doesn't really hold true, because if you're to take more resources in, then you should expect to live longer. So the disposable disposable soma theory, while it does have some application, doesn't seem to really hold true. A more recent theory is called the free radical theory. And free radicals are things that are produced by biological processes, and they're very damaging. So all of the enzymatic reactions and biochemical reactions that are handled by our body, toxins like smoke and so on, they all generate these free radicals which can damage us, and we can repair that damage to a certain extent. But in this theory, as the free radical damage sort of accumulates, we get older, and therefore things don't work as well. You start to get problems with your joints, with back pain, with the sort of things that come with aging that we all know about. The problem with this theory is that it would predict that taking antioxidants would extend life, or at least provide some measurable benefit. And there are some very powerful antioxidants, such as vitamin C and vitamin E. And we did many very expensive large studies to see if taking vitamin E would in fact extend lifespan, prevent heart disease, would it prevent things like cancer. And unfortunately, it just didn't turn out to be the case. And all of these vitamins had gone through the vogue, B vitamins, C vitamins, E vitamins, all of them have been tested. And unfortunately, it just doesn't seem to be true. So, while we know that there are free radicals, it's rather unclear whether these free radicals actually contribute to aging as we know it. Another theory that has become very popular is the theory of hormesis. And hormesis is the idea that small amounts of poisonous or dangerous materials actually makes us stronger. In other words, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's the idea. And we see this effect in a lot of places. For example, exercise is a form of stress. When you lift something very heavy, you're causing little micro traumatic tears in your muscle, and as you rebuild that muscle, it actually rebuilds stronger. Same thing with bone. As you put the pressure on the bone, your body responds by making it stronger. So astronauts who go up into space where there's no stress on their bones because of the lack of gravity, they in fact develop osteoporosis. Calorie restriction would therefore also be a stress, and as our body gets used to it, it would actually become more and more strong and able to resist that stress. Drinking alcohol is another example where if you take a little bit of alcohol, we know that there are many studies on moderate drinking of, say, red wine, and it seems that those people who do that are actually healthier than if they didn't drink any alcohol at all. So hormesis is a real biological process, but how much of it actually applies to aging? And the problem is with all of these is the basic tenet of toxicology, which is the dose makes the poison. In small doses, things are good, but in large doses, they're bad, whether it's calorie restriction or exercise or alcohol. When you do those things to extremes, you actually do worse than if you didn't do them at all. And in aging, it's really hard to see how hormesis really plays a role. It's aging is something that happens over time, over and over. So it's not a small amount of something, it's a large amount of something. So it really can't explain why things get worse. We use our joints a little bit all the time, like walking, for example, but as we age, many of us still develop inflammation and arthritis. So that brings us to the current thinking around aging. And it sort of incorporates a little bit of all of those sorts of theories. And the current thinking about aging is that it's not fixed chronologically, but it's really this sort of interplay between growth versus longevity. That is, aging is not something that is deliberately programmed into us, but the same processes that are responsible for growth are also responsible for aging. So therefore, at certain points in your life, you want to prioritize prioritize growth, but after that, in fact, growth is not a good thing because it's going to work against you in terms of longevity. A car, for example, you might think, well, it's great to have a fast car, and it's great to be able to drive it all the time. So you rev the engine and you go very fast, and it feels great. But the problem is that it's just not going to last as long. And that's the sort of idea. If you're going to keep growing, well, you're revving your engine, you're revving your metabolism, and that's going to come at the cost of longevity. And therefore, in order to maximize longevity and health span, you actually have to take it a little bit on the slower side and try and reduce the growth. The question is, how are you going to do that? And that brings us to the very important topic of nutrient sensors. The body, in fact, has several different nutrient sensors, and we're going to go into them a little bit more in the next video that's coming up. But insulin is one of the nutrient sensors. mTOR, or the mechanism target of rapamycin, and AMPK, they're what are called nutrient sensors because they tell the body that nutrients are coming in. And our body uses these exact same signals to tell us to grow or to not grow. When we have a high level of these nutrient sensors, our body goes into growth mode, trying to grow more to take advantage of the available nutrients. You gotta make hay while the sun shines. But when you start to turn down some of these growth mechanisms by reducing the nutrient sensors, well, your body's going to go into this sort of maintenance mode, and that's what's important for longevity. Thanks for joining me today. If you're interested in some fasting tips or how to use fasting, you can check out my other videos. I'll see you next week.